titled Walk With Me, Walking with a Place in Reshaping Cities into Vibrant, Healthy, and Resilient Places. And I start with the fundamental point that we are all pedestrians at some point in our journey. Yet walking is the least preferred option, often when accessing different activities throughout the day. In this presentation, I would like to bring a critical lens in exploring the concept of equity in walkability, in walking. I will do this by proposing a framework that will help shed light on an important but neglected dimension of walkability, the diversity of the pedestrian experience, including the inequities associated with being a pedestrian. So I'm now in Melbourne, and the University of Melbourne would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work, learn, and live. And so for me, it is the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation. And we here at the university acknowledge and is grateful to the traditional owners, elders, and knowledge holders of all Indigenous nations and clans who have been instrumental in our reconciliation journey. And we recognize the important place that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the original owners and custodians of the lands and waterways across the Australian continent, with histories of continuous connection dating back more than 60,000 years. And I would also want to recognize that they were the first pedestrians, the first walkers of the Australian continent. And I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. And in making this acknowledgement of country, I commit to respectful and responsible conduct towards all others according to the traditional laws of this land, particularly at times of formal ceremony. So last November, last month, the largest and most important climate summit spearheaded by the United Nations was held in Azerbaijan. And the annual summit, better known as COP29, brings together individuals from different parts of the globe, from different sectors, private, public, and the civil society. And the aim is to convene, track progress, negotiate, and take collective action to make decisions on how we can better support a safer climate in cities and communities. So one climate adaptation strategy that has been recognized to contribute to the decarbonization conversation is walking and cycling, which we collectively know as active transport. While most research usually focus on what built environment encourage walking, there is not a lot of research on understanding who the pedestrian is. So this research of mine is premised that a better understanding of the pedestrian experience is critical to transforming urban areas into pedestrian-friendly places. So I pose these two questions: who is the pedestrian, and how can we better understand their walking experience? As I've mentioned, we all are pedestrians, yet intensifying climate, road safety, and physical inactivity are intersecting challenges that continue to threaten the quality of life and well-being of pedestrians, not just in Australian cities, but globally. So cars in Australia, cars hitting pedestrians, result in 160 deaths yearly, and it costs the Australian community 1.2 billion Australian dollars, and is one of the leading causes of death for older and younger pedestrians. We are also a fat nation, with adolescents leading an increasingly sedentary lifestyle. So physical inactivity actually translates to 2.4 billion Australian dollars in health system spending in 2018 and 2019 alone. So the World Health Organization claims that up to 5 million lives could have been saved if an active lifestyle was made a priority. This rightmost figure shows that compared to other modes, walking and cycling do not emit as much carbon as other modes, hence has no or very limited impact on the natural environment. So these are all reasons why there is a need to research and focus on increasing walkability and creating walkable places. Because if we continue business as usual, these challenges will continue and will be on top of all other challenges that we are experiencing, such as heat stress, wildfires, flooding, and as climate intensifies, it will further marginalize already vulnerable pedestrian population. So as we can see, climate change is an underrated threat to pedestrians. So just a bit of definition, a pedestrian is a person that is on foot or in a toy vehicle pushing a perambulator or wheelchair, or in a motorized or non-motorized wheelchair. But the most important bit is that they do not travel at a speed greater than 10 kilometers per hour. However, how we measure walkability is quite, I guess, ancient, right? We consider, the convention is we consider the automotive, level of service as the basis for identifying the level of service for pedestrians. However, we know that based on evidence, this is not usually the case, right? If there are more people, it means bad pedestrian level of service, but it's not the case. And according to Jane Jacobs, actually, more people translates to walking environments, safer walking environments, as she introduced the concept of eyes on the street. So more eyes, more people, more eyes, safer environment. She also coined the concept of sidewalk ballet, which refers to the different activities that we can encounter that happens on the sidewalks when we are, walking, which makes our pedestrian experience more interesting. So according to Anne Forsyth in her paper, What is a Walkable Place? And it's a walkability debate in urban design. She mentions that there's great interest in shaping more walkable environments, but there's still a lack of clarity to develop theory to guide practice. So this is where my jump-off point is when I want to propose the need to achieve a just transition to walkable places. It is important that we recognize that a shift to net zero will not be sustainable if it generates or continues to aggravate inequalities. So what are the inequalities that happen, as a pedestrian? So I draw from Crenshaw, who introduced the concept of intersectionality to understand the intersecting modes of discrimination because of a person's intersecting social identities. This is fundamentally what intersectionality means when we can all be women, right? We can all be women. You can see from the image there, they're all identifying women, female identifying individuals. But you can also be a young girl, meaning two identities, age and gender, or a Muslim woman, two identities, again, gender and race or religious affiliation. You can also be a young woman identifying member of the LGBTQIA+, or who has invisible disability, or an older Black female, right? So depending on number of identities, it can be 3, it can be 4. However, when we talk about research, this is not usually captured. This intersectionality is not captured. However, according to Crenshaw, that intersection could actually translate into some kind of discrimination or oppression just because you have those identities. And so this figure shows several intersecting axes of privilege, domination, or oppression. Hence, when multiple identities intersect, for example, age, gender, and abilities, this interaction might lead to some sort of oppression or discrimination, and then this can influence how we decide as pedestrians, what routes to choose, which direction to go, how to behave when walking, ultimately shaping our walking experience. So the pedestrian experience, because of these intersecting identities, can either be very easy and pleasurable, or it can be distressing or hostile, right? So for example, if you are an able-bodied person walking under, shaded trees, then, that would be very pleasant. However, if you are a single lady living with disability or on a wheelchair, and there is no, path or no support in terms of a seamless movement, then it will definitely be distressing and hostile. So the recognition of the diversity of pedestrian experience and the knowledge derived from this experience are vital to pedestrian infrastructure planning so that we can effectively transition to a just and sustainable and inclusive society. So I conducted a systematic literature review. And so I followed a stepwise process. First, we identified journal articles that were published in the past 15 years, from 2018 to 2023, in relevant research databases in the fields of transport, urban design, and health. Then we looked at the inclusion-exclusion criteria to help screen articles, papers that examine an aspect of the urban physical environment, things that are focused on walking as a distinct mode of transport, different from recreational walking, right? And so those written in English were included. We excluded non-English literature, gray literature, and duplicates. Then we enumerate several keywords, and finally, this led to 118 articles. And then we undertook a content analysis to thematically analyze the studies that were included. So you can see from that table on the right, the number of articles that were focused on one identity. And on the fourth one, so intersectionalities, you can see there the combination of identities and the number of articles. So this initial appraisal has revealed that pedestrian studies have privileged some identities. So there are more research being done to some identity, but not to others. And so it has exposed who are missing in the walking literature. So the SLR, or Semi-Systematic Review of Pedestrian Studies, disclosed that most of them have explored unitary identity, so meaning only one social identity considered, either gender or race or age, but not a combination. Only very few considered multiple intersectional identities. From the previous table, you could see that there were a few. For instance, most walkability research have focused on older pedestrians, elderly. So 42 articles out of 54 found in the age category. Only one article on adolescent pedestrians. Out of the 14 articles found in the gender category, 5 studies have focused on women, female pedestrian experience, while 9 articles compared women's experience to that of their male counterpart. And the exercise also confirmed that some identities remained invisible. So there is no research that has been conducted to date that solely explored the experience of male pedestrians. There has been no scholarly work that focused on the LGBTQIA plus community as pedestrians, or those who identify as gender diverse or non-binary. While from an abilities lens, there were 7 articles on pedestrians with visible disability, so those who are visually and mobility focused disability, but none attempted to understand the experience of pedestrians with invisible or intellectual disability. So informed by the SLR, I have now drawn 6 relevant thematic areas identified and reflected as part of that pedestrian intersectional equity diagram. So this initial framework, I hope, would be a good starting point to then explore, pedestrian inequities. And so in this presentation, I aim to bring to light pedestrian equity agenda by first understanding the pedestrians that have been the subject of research and those who continue to be invisible, right? So that's pedestrian representation. And the next step of the research agenda is to explore the type of environments pedestrians have been investigated on and otherwise. So that's pedestrian participation. That's a second, theme. And then the third part of the research agenda is to look at the different inequities or injustices that they have experienced from a place and policy perspective. So that's place and policy-based intersectional inequities. From here, the framework will help identify recommendations that can be made to help policymakers and built environment practitioners such as us design and deliver safer urban spaces that encourage walking as a mode of travel, which will in turn improve community well-being for all, reduce economic costs associated with poor health and unsafe spaces, and have a positive impact to society. And so I guess that ends my presentation. So active travel is definitely a pathway to global carbonization. And through this process of identifying pedestrian inequities, I'm hoping that we can recognize that pedestrian voice matters in this whole process. Thank you very much.